In this session, we're going to talk about the all or nothing mindset that, again, is super common in our clients. So by the end of the session, we're going to understand that mindset a little bit more, and you're going to have some tools that are going to support clients who do experience an all or nothing mindset. Let's jump straight in. Okay, so the best way of representing the all or nothing mindset is with the pendulum. Okay, so it's the idea that clients are either all the way over here where they are being, this is the all part of the all or nothing, right? So they're being extremely restrictive. They would say that they're dieting, they're being good, they're on track, they're being very disciplined. And this is also shown through quite a lot of rigidity. So things need to go exactly the way they want them to go. Okay, so there's a lot of rigidity there, and they're being really good. Okay, but then the other side of the pendulum, this would be the nothing side, is this, right? So it's exactly the opposite. It's those cheat days, overeating, being bad. That's their words, not mine, by the way. Binging. So we're not talking about a binge disorder, but we're talking about over consuming a lot of calories in a short space of time when they probably weren't hungry or they didn't want to do that. And then there's this feeling that they are off track. So it's a very binary way to look at things. They're either good or they're bad. They're either on track or they're off track. They're either dieting or they're not dieting. Okay, so there's no nuance there. And actually, because their identity means that they're either having to be all, when they make a mistake or they don't do things exactly to plan, then the only other option is for them to be off, because to be on means that they're supposed to be perfect. Okay, so it leads to this really binary nature where there is no nuance or opportunity for their identity to have different behaviors within it. And that's why when they're off, because to be off means the opposite of being on. And when they're on, again, it's the opposite of being off. Okay, so they live in different spaces. And this kind of way of looking at things, it would be, called a cognitive distortion if we're thinking about it through a CBT lens. But it lends itself, right, to this, the fuck it mentality. That is kind of where this goes. It's the idea that, well, I've gone over my calories, so I may as well eat whatever, because if I was being good and being on my diet, I wouldn't have done that, but I have done it, so what's the point now? Something like, I can't complete all my gym sessions this week, so what's the point? Again, you can see here, like, very binary nature. It has to be perfect, and if it's not, then there's no point at all. So you can start to see the perfectionism within there. And of course, it's that fuck it thing, right? It's kind of, unless it can be done the way that it I think it needs to be done, then there's no point doing it at all. And we know that this really gets in the way for clients, because obviously their journey isn't going to be perfect, because we are humans, so we can't be perfect. But this means that it's almost like that stop-start nature. They start, they have loads of motivation, it's going so well, and then an obstacle comes up, and then they almost fall off, the terminology they would use. And then they've stopped again and they have to start again. But when they start again, it goes back to being extreme. So actually, I'm going to go back for a second, because when it comes to the pendulum, what we're saying is that when somebody swings all the way over to the left, because they've swung all the way over to the left, it makes it more likely that they're going to swing all the way over to the right. And they get stuck in between these two places. So what they'll do is they'll be really, really restrictive. Because they've been too restrictive, then they have cheat days. Okay, and because they've had cheat days or they feel like they've been bad, they'll then jump and be over restrictive. So they're constantly hopping between too restrictive or completely overindulging, and there is no in between, just a complete swinging back and forth. And that's why we use the kind of pendulum in that example. Okay, so this thinking style, this all or nothing thinking or binary thinking, it's not the best, as we can imagine, but let's explore that a little bit more. So firstly, it reduces confidence, because they're not building up evidence that they are successful. It might be able to last for a couple of weeks, but what they're actually learning about themselves is they can't do it. They can't stick to it. And all that's doing is undermining their confidence. It increases the feelings of frustration, guilt, shame, and anxiety, because obviously nobody can stick to that, right? But when they don't stick to it because they think that they're supposed to, then they're starting to feel really frustrated at themselves, at the process, at you. They also start to feel guilty, like, why can't I do this? Why have I overate again this weekend? Or why am I not allowing myself to eat the foods that I want to eat? And then alongside that as well comes the shame and guilt, the shame that they keep engaging in this cycle, and the anxiety they feel like they're not going to get to their goals. They're not going to get to what it is that they want to achieve. This thinking style is what is going to keep your clients stuck. Okay. Until they're able to move forward in a different way, they are going to remain in that place. Stop, start, and actually just spinning their wheels. They kind of take, one step forward, two steps back. And so really they're not making much forward progress because they're being maintained in that place, and it continuously is reducing their confidence over time as well. So we know that we need to help clients move from this thinking style. And ultimately, it sets them up for failure. We know that an all or nothing mindset is not going to help somebody with their diet or their movement in the long term. It's not sustainable. So we know that something has to change, right? Now, mentioned it a few times before, so you won't be surprised for me to tell you that this is underlined in part by perfectionism. So all or nothing thinking is what people with perfectionism often engage in. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of definitions now of perfectionism. We've got one here: excessively high personal standards and overly critical self-evaluations. So that's a horrible pairing, right? You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to meet standards, and then when you don't, there is that hugely critical element as well. This is a great definition, this one: the tendency to demand an extremely high level or even flawless level of performance in excess of what is required by the situation. So it's this the thing of that they need to be perfect. They can't make any mistakes. They can't eat or engage in exercise in a way that's not flawless. Okay, so really they're trying not to be human, because we know, as humans, we make mistakes. That's just the way things are. So they don't allow that of themselves. But a really important thing in here is that it's in excess of what is required by the situation. So hopefully, obviously, you guys will know that for somebody to lose weight, it doesn't require that much. Okay, a moderate calorie deficit. They don't have to be going to the gym every day. They don't have to do everything absolutely perfectly. They can eat the kind of foods they want to eat with a bit of moderation around it and a bit of flexibility around it. Okay, so but what they think, or the way that this thinking style manifests, is that they act as though they have to do way in excess of what's required. So in order for them to be successful, they feel like they have to be perfect. They feel like they have to achieve all of these things. And so when they don't, it leads to that, well, what's the point then? Okay, when actually they could afford to do a lot less and still make progress. But it's just the fact that when things don't go well, there's almost that stopping nature, like we said. So there's not that small continual moving forward. There's on, off, on, off. So hopefully that makes some sense now, right? And you may even see this in yourselves, because in people who are very ambitious, people who run their own businesses, people in this space, it's very common for us to be experiencing perfectionism. So you might notice in yourself that that's what's going on. So the antidote then, really, or what it is that we're trying to get to, is we're trying to help clients to not be in that pendulum swinging back and forth, but it's to land somewhere nice and stable in the middle. So the middle would look like moderation, balance, being flexible. We mean that psychologically. So psychological flexibility as opposed to rigid. Rigid would be when we put rules on ourselves, like I must, it should, needs to. Okay, so it's rules about ourselves, other people, and the world that are super rigid. Whereas when we're more flexible, we can have a preference about these things, but we can also accept when things don't go to plan. So for example, if you're in the gym and you wanted to do lat pull downs and the machine was taken, a rigid mindset would be like, well, I'm supposed to do lat pull downs and I can't do them now, so what's the point? Whereas a flexible mindset would be like, okay, my preference would be to do lat pull downs, but I accept that the machine's busy. I'm still going to do what I can. So maybe I'll try something different, knowing that it's not quite the same. It's not quite perfect, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. So that's the difference between a rigid and a flexible mindset. And the final one then is to be mindful. So rather than being super restrictive or completely overindulging, it's that mindful approach to eating. It's getting back in tune with those interoception, or the internal cues that we have that are telling us about hunger and thirst, satiation. So we want to get to this place. It's the idea of progress over perfection. Yeah, it's the idea of small, steady steps forward rather than these massive extreme things and then pausing and massive and pause and massive and pause. Okay. So we know this. Clients know this. But the hard thing is actually doing this. Okay. What tends to be going on is that we, or our clients, have uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. So they might have the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings around, the fact that they've made a mistake, they haven't been perfect, they've messed up in some way, they didn't quite have access to the food they wanted, they didn't behave in the way they wanted. And then those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings are what's guiding their behavior. Okay, so they might have a fear of not achieving their goal because of whatever's going on, and that leads them to engage in all or nothing behavior. So the uncomfortable thought and feeling would be the fear, and then the behavior would be anything all or nothing based. So whether that be that they've had a weekend where they went out with friends and they overindulged, then on the Monday, because the uncomfortable feeling might be guilt or frustration, based on that, they then be over restrictive. Okay, so that is what's driving that behavior. Alternatively, one avenue that we might explore, and one thing that we want to help clients do instead, is actually for their values to be guiding their behavior. Okay, so firstly, they need to know what their values are. Maybe they value courage, persistence, kindness. So we'll use the same example again. Maybe they went out for the weekend and they overindulged with their clients. They wake up on the Monday morning, they feel anxiety, they feel frustration, they feel guilt. But rather than acting from that place of discomfort or uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, instead, they're going to get in touch with their values, and they're going to realize, oh, I really value being courageous or being persistent or being kind. So how does that relate to myself? How can I be kind to myself here? What would persistence look like for me in this situation? What would the courageous step be? And then the behavior in that instant might be moving forward, even when they haven't been perfect. Okay. Or actually moving forward, even though they feel fearful, even though they feel anxious, even though they feel guilty, still moving towards what matters. And of course, that would take courage. And if that's one of those values, then that's excellent. Okay. Now, the next part is similar to the self-sabotage session, because ultimately, if we're going to be taking an ACT approach, which is an approach that I take with a lot of my clients, the same principles underlies most things, which is that common barriers come from the fact that we're allowing uncomfortable thoughts and feelings to be in the driver's seat and to drive behavior, when really we want to go from a place of values or what's important to us. So it leads us back to the choice point again. Okay, so it's that idea of, the scale weight hasn't moved. We've got those all or nothing thoughts, so that desire to be overly restrictive again, or that desire to just overindulge, the fuck it feeling. But reminding clients and helping clients through the choice point that in that moment, they can move away from what matters, or they can move toward. And again, moving away would be that short-term relief. So being over restrictive, but in the long term, they're going to regret it because they can't maintain being over restrictive. Or in the short term, they'll overindulge. But again, in the long term, that's not going to help because it's not going to help them move to their goal. So actually the option then is to move toward. It's doing what's going to take them closer to their goal, despite it being hard and despite experiencing challenging emotions along the way. Now, obviously, it's really hard to move towards what matters when we are experiencing uncomfortable emotions. And there are plenty of techniques in acceptance commitment therapy that allows us to almost unhook from these challenging thoughts, which creates a bit more space for us to be able to move and experience them without taking up our whole awareness. Those kind of techniques would be about getting present. They'd be about diffusion. And you'll notice that in the tools and strategies, a Notion page that you have access to in the Skilled Coach Toolbox, that there are some more techniques in there that will help you with these sorts of things. Now, this is an exercise that you can do with your clients, which is super useful. All right. So the first thing we do is we start here, which is what thoughts, feelings, and sensations show up. So when they're engaging in those all or nothing behaviors, you can take the all. So when they're being too restrictive, and then you can take the almost fuck it side of things when they're not being restrictive at all, and get them to write down as many as possible and as much detail as possible, the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that show up. Here's an example. So maybe anxiety and stress, and the thoughts might be, I'm never going to be able to do this. The next thing they do is they can write down the behaviors that they do when those feelings show up. So when they feel anxious and stressed, or when they have the thought that they're never going to be able to do it, what do? Maybe they order a takeaway. Maybe they be more restricted with their calories. Maybe they skip the gym. So getting them to come up with a list of their behaviors. So they're starting to understand, these are my away moves. I understand now. I understand that my away moves tell me about my feelings, or I understand that when I feel a certain thing, this is my default behavior. Then we help them to explore what is important to them. So this is the values work, or it could be a bit broader. So wanting to feel confident, want to be healthy, their goals and values go in there. And then lastly, up here, We get them to think about what they could do that gets them closer to what matters. So what behaviors could they engage in that takes them toward feeling confident or toward feeling healthy or being healthy? So maybe speak to coach, reassure myself, keep working hard, aim for balance. Okay, so now they've almost got this map for themselves so that when they are at the choice point, they can identify how they're feeling. They can almost see the two life paths laid out ahead of them. Now, it's important to notice here that at that choice point, because there'll be a lot of emotion involved, in order for them to be able to move towards what matters, they're going to have to be able to pause, and they're going to have to be able to bring awareness and reflect. And so that takes some tools. So you might want to go over to the tools and strategies toolkit and use like the STOP acronym or any mindfulness-based tasks here. And then finally, then there are some other tools and strategies that we can use to help clients who experience all or nothing thinking style. The first one is to have ranges. So for more information, like I said, jump over to the Skilled Coach Toolbox for all of these, that you have more information. But if somebody is all or nothing, and so there's this idea they need to be perfect to be successful or to make progress, rather than telling them to have a set calorie target or a set number of gym sessions, actually introducing an acceptable range. So maybe it's 2 to 4 gym sessions. So they have a wider or a broader area for success. So it's not like, okay, I didn't do 3, so I failed. It's, when I'm really motivated, I did 4, but this week I was really busy and I wasn't that motivated, but I still did 2. So I was still successful. Okay. So anything that we can do to kind of move away from perfectionism is really helpful. The idea of the conveyor belt, again, you'll see that, but it's the idea that if they do a behavior that they're not happy with, rather than fixating on that behavior and allowing all the bags on the conveyor belt to pile up, it's actually just focusing on grabbing the next bag. Okay, I didn't do what I wanted to do. What's the next action that I can do that takes me towards my goals? The idea of helping them over time to lower the bar. Can they give themselves permission to just lower the bar? If they've missed out, rather than being extreme and swinging absolutely to the other side of the pendulum, can they lower the bar and just do something? And then that idea of having a moment to think about what is it that their future self would want in this situation. Does it ever work when they're overly restrictive? Does it ever work when they just say, fuck it? Probably not. Okay. So almost zooming out to the future and figuring out what is it that my future self would want me to do here. So that rounds up that session on all or nothing thinking. And I look forward to seeing you in the next session.